Alright, welcome back to my Dodge Raider rebuild series. This is episode 9. This project is quickly spiraling into a full-on rebuild. If you watched from the very beginning, my first episode I mentioned I was trying to get into this car for super cheap. Got it for 180 bucks. I wanted to see if I could get it on the road as kind of a daily driver for 500 bucks. Well, we're way beyond that as far as tearing the sucker apart and fixing stuff. When you buy super cheap cars off of Craigslist or something that hasn't been running for a long time, you basically encounter the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and that's tires, battery, fluids, and brakes. And you're always going to fix all 4 of those pretty much when you buy an older car or something that hasn't been running, and that right there is going to boost you up to $1,000 on expenses. And then whatever the original problem was that got the car to be parked in the first place. So that's exactly what we've encountered here, is that as I tore into fixing the engine knock, I just kept encountering small things that needed to be fixed. And now I've got to the point where we've torn apart the interior and all the way down the dash, the heater core, the air conditioning, everything's out of this car now. So it's definitely geared more towards a full-on rebuild. This week I worked on the transmission a bit. I got those bolts out of the fluid pump out of the transmission. I found a socket that actually fit. Was able to get the bolts out and pull that pump out. Was going to put an O-ring around it, try to fix the whatever leak there may have been, and I discovered that the torque converter bushing looked pretty chewed up. So I've got an order in for a new bushing. I set the pump aside for the week and moved on to interior work. Okay, I found a socket that worked on these transmission pump bolts. The bolt heads are ground down pretty shallow there, but I found a socket that was pretty much flush on the top, and it fit that pretty good. So I'm pulling these bolts out, and I have good news. It doesn't appear there's any stripping of any kind. It looks like these may be the stock bolts, and they're the proper thread. I'm not finding any evidence that they're stripped. So there's really no reason to pull this transmission out at this point. I'm going to pull the pump off and replace the O-ring and the seal, drain the fluid, check the filter, and replace a couple of the axle seals or the driveline seals in the back. But I think we're gonna be able to leave this transmission in. So that's one step I don't have to worry about. Okay, so I pulled out the transmission fluid pump, just undid these bolts, took a little bit of wiggling, but it pops out, and I'm going to replace the torque converter seal and this main O-ring that goes around the outside. That's where it was probably leaking from. This O-ring looks kind of flat. And then I bought some thread sealant for all these bolts. Apparently the book does call to pack the bolt head with some sealant. It keeps any fluid from dripping out of there. So we're gonna clean this up, replace those seals, and then we're gonna put this right back in. Alright, we're taking the bolts out of the back of this fluid pump so that I can pull it apart and put in the torque converter seal. So there, so there's the torque converter seal. We're going to tap a new one in here. Right here. Okay, as I pull these two halves apart, you can see this O-ring that I initially wanted to replace pops off of there. It runs on that groove right around there. But upon closer inspection of this bearing, there's a copper or brass bearing that the torque converter rides on, and it looks fairly chewed up. I can feel it's got some pretty good chunks in it. And it looks to me like somebody has replaced this torque converter seal in the past, and what they did is they left it on the car most likely and shoved a screwdriver in there to get it out, and it scraped up that bearing in there pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and just order one. I'm going to knock this out, punch that bearing out. I'm going to order a new one and tap it in, just for peace of mind. So this is going to have to wait a couple of days so I can go order get online and order a new bearing. And my plan was the original plan was to fix the heater core, which had obviously sprung a leak, and ended up taking everything out of the car as far as carpet, dash, all three air boxes. You have a air conditioning box, you have a heater box, and you have the fan motor box. All three of those came out. And worked on a steering wheel problem. The steering wheel seems to be a bit loose. I'm going to have to figure out a way to tighten that up. Alright, so I put in an order for those transmission parts, the seals and the bushing for that pump. That's going to be a few days before I get those parts, so we're kind of at a natural breaking point on the suspension and motor. I'm going to shift gears and start tearing out this interior. I'm going to get rid of the carpets, center console. I'm going to pull out the heater core. And then we're going to see what we can do about the shifter on that transfer case. Take out this roll bar and sand it down and paint it. I'm going to put the roll bar back in because I think it looks kind of cool. And then we'll go at it from there. So let's get started. taken out this roll cage here, and I got all the bolts out except for one on each corner. I can't seem to get to the nut that's up into a boxed-in section. They must have put it together, and then when they gunned it, it drew that nut so far up there I can't get to it. So I'm just going to chop the head of this bolt off with a Dremel and get it out of there. Alright, the Dremel's taking too long, so let's see if we can start a fire. Success! Fire! Alright, we're going to pull this dash out so I can get to that heater core down there. I wanted to tighten up a couple of things and look at some wiring, maybe grease the levers for the heat and air conditioning. First we have to pull this steering wheel. So you get your steering wheel puller kit out, and you'll have two threaded spots for your long bolts, and then you've got this H that bolts on here with your center bolt. And the center bolt just pushes against the center steering column and pulls away the steering wheel. There you go. That's what the bolt looks like. All right. Got it. Well, there's a bunch of things to pull off the back of that. The hardest one were a couple of these big ones back here seem to be stuck together. So I'll give this a once over. I'll check all the light bulbs in the back and check all the circuits, make sure it's working. I've got a spare one of these that I can replace any components that I find not working. Well, you can see here that they replaced the stock oil pressure gauge with an aftermarket, and they just broke out the old face, ripped out all the mechanism, and then cut out a hole in the back and stuck the new gauge in there. So I don't know, I'm probably going to replace it because it doesn't look that great. I think it'd look better if it was all stock. We'll see. These things are about 75 bucks on eBay. Don't know if I want to spend that much just for a stock looking oil gauge. We'll see. Give it some thought. Alright, we got the dash out. That was a real bummer. A lot of things to disconnect, a lot of cables to disconnect. But this allows me access to the heater core, and I'm going to clean everything up and replace a few odds and ends. I got a loose steering column here, and so I'm going to replace this windshield. It'll be a lot easier now. I can peel this out, put a new one in. So yeah, making progress one step at a time. You'll see here that when I take apart something with it includes a lot of nuts and bolts, I always put them in envelopes and label them. Dash bolts, heater control, the center brace, the incline pod. Makes it a lot easier. When I go to put this dash back together, it'll be a lot easier just to grab the envelope that's labeled for whatever I'm working on. I learned that years ago. Harbor Freight sells a assortment tray where you can put bolts and label them, and that's something that would also work. I've had my eye on one of those for a while. So next we're going to work on this heater core. Alright, here's the heater box, and I found it easier just to take it out because we have to pull this heater core straight out, and I found it just easier to pull it all the way out. Plus I want to clean it all up. I'm going to pull it apart and just get all the dirt out of it. And it'll be easier to work on this on my bench in the other room than here on the car. So the next thing we'll take a look at is the AC evaporator right here. The fan, the blower motor, make sure those are working. I'm going to replace all the foam parts. You got a foam screen right here that's just powder, as well as all the foam parts that connect all these together. And the doors, the trap doors here have foam tape around them, but it's all powdered. So that'll all get replaced. You can see the heater core right here is just all been leaking. There's a break in the copper or the brass somewhere. And also all of this foam, these trap doors are all lined with foam. You can see the foam is just powdered. This falls apart and blows through the whole system. Alright, next we're going to take out this AC box. At the very least I want to clean it out. It's got some overflow from that heater core. And so we're going to pull this box. I'm probably not going to pull the heater fan. I just have to replace some of this foam padding, but we'll see how we go. Anyway, got 2 bolts up here that I undid and 1 in the firewall. And we just have to pull out the tubes to the evaporator. And there's the AC box. Give it some Windex. I'll pull it apart and clean out the bottom. The condensation on that AC evaporator drips to the bottom and drips out a hole outside into the firewall area. But the bottom is all coagulated, so I'll play around with that, clean it up. Alright, we went ahead and removed the heater fan. It's turning a bit stiff, and there's a bunch of pine needles and some mud inside of it, especially around the kind of the thermostat area. So I'm going to have to blow this apart too, clean it all up, replace some of this foam on all the connections, and then we'll put it back in. So as you can see, I mean, this is getting pretty ridiculous. Took everything out of the dash. Okay, we're at the point on this dash where there's not much left. I have a few things that I want to fix up here before I start putting the dash back together. The first thing is, of course, I'm going to clean it all up. You can see here that everything's pretty dirty, so I'm just going to get out the Windex and some paper towels, and we're going to clean everything up first of all. Next is, I've got an issue with the padding, firewall padding here. It's a real thick kind of a tar or a rubber that's backed by this thick padding. Well, that soaked up a bunch of the radiator fluid when that burst right there, and you can see the streaks of where the radiator fluid poured down here and on that side. And at the bottom of these sound deadening pads, it's still damp in there, and you can smell it's pretty musty on both sides, especially the far side. So I'm gonna take it out, and put new padding behind it. And I'm going to rip up this center. You can see the center hump has padding. And it's, especially on the other side, it's pretty soaked through with antifreeze. And that stuff doesn't really dry out. It's kind of an oily substance and it doesn't go away. So I'm going to get rid of the padding and put some new padding in there. Next, I've got to fix the steering column, which is loose. And it's annoying when you want to do the turn signals, everything's moving around, right? Well, these braces here, this turn signal apparatus is bolted or screwed to this brace. But what they did is they bolted on these braces with bolts that don't have heads on them. They're permanent. Well, those are loose, so I've got to get the book out and figure out why they're loose. First of all, if it's missing a shim, or because I see no way to tighten it. I've dealt with these before, and what you have to do is drill them out. When they screwed these on, they screwed these bolts on, and they snapped off the head. There's a head that attached to their mechanism. They bolted them on, and then they snapped them off. You can see where the metal's snapped off here. If I go around this side, you can see that they are threaded. You know, it's a bolt. So that's got to be fixed. And then lastly, we're going to replace this windshield. And those are replaced by peeling up this rubber seal this way and pushing out with the windshield, and then just doing the opposite when we put the new windshield in. And it's way easier without having a dash right here. So got a handful of things to fix up here, and then we will start putting this dash back together. Okay, you can see here that these rounded off bolt heads, we just drilled a hole into the center of one of them. You just tap it with a small screw and then go up a size, and then we'll get our bolt extractor kit out and try to extract this. If I can't extract it with a bolt extractor kit, then I'll just drill this out with a bigger size and knock that head clean off of there. So here's the bolt extractor kit you can buy at the local hardware store. It's just a oddly shaped screw that you insert into the hole. Okay, as you can see here, I used this bolt extractor. You just push it in there, use a wrench, turn this way, and it grabs that bolt by the hole that you created. It binds itself into the hole because it's got this weird spiral on it, and you can see that this now comes right out. What I'll do is I'll just go down to the, and there's the bolt that was in there. I'll just go down to the hardware store and actually buy maybe a screw, Phillips head screw that I can put into there. And we'll just do it one more time right here, and then I'll be able to take this collar off and figure out why it's loose. There you go. It's just a real simple process of drilling a hole in the end of that and screwing them out. Furthermore, you can do that with any type of a bolt you strip. If you strip a bolt, just drill a hole right down the center of it and use those easy out bolt extractors. Okay, well, I sure don't know why it wasn't grabbing that steering column. I'm gonna have to clean it up and perhaps just grind a little bit of the surface off of one of these sides so that when it comes back together, it's a little tighter. It's the only thing I can figure. I also decided to try to clean up the carpet. I tore the carpets out of this car, and they're pretty dirty, muddy, stains, the whole 9 yards. But I just thought maybe I could save a few bucks and clean it up. So I took them outside. I soaked the carpet in hot water with a carpet cleaner for a couple of hours, and then scrubbed them down and hosed them off. And although they look a lot better, I think I'm gonna have to order a new carpet kit. And I also started the process of cleaning up the air boxes. We have the 3 air boxes that I pulled out of the radiator back there. And I'm going to tear them apart, clean them up, and replace a couple of parts and put them back together. Primarily, I want to make sure the fan works. I'm going to replace all the foam. This is all really dry and brittle. And I'm going to clean them all up, and then I'm going to test the motor and the thermostat. And then we'll do the same thing with the AC box and with the heater core. So this fan here has been replaced. The heater fan motor. Made in Mexico. It's all brand new looking, and it's been glued to the base. So at some point not too long ago, the fan's been replaced, and they've spliced it into the wires. So that's interesting. I mean, not necessarily bad, just interesting. I'm going to test this motor. I got a little battery pack here. We're just going to hook it up and see if it spins. Yep. Yeah, works great. Just unclipped all these little clips that run the circumference of this housing, and then it breaks in half, pulls apart. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to this door, this fresh air, hot cold door, because it's wrapped in foam, and I'm going to replace all the foam on it. Because if you put your finger across this, it just falls apart. And like look, it just turns to dust, and that just goes through the car. So we're gonna get rid of all that. And what I'll do is I got a pail full of hot soapy water. This will just get scrubbed and cleaned, and will be like brand new. So this door that came out, I'm gonna peel all this foam off of it, and I'm gonna cut a new piece and glue it on there. Okay, there you can see we got the box put back together. New trap door, or I should say the foam in the trap door has been replaced. So now it's not going to fall apart. Now I just have to put on the rest of the gearing, put the fan motor in it. Also, I'm having a little bit of an issue finding a heater core for this car. I can't find one online. I went to a couple of auto parts stores and it's all been discontinued. So what I might have to do, if I can't find one in the next few days, I might have to just order a generic heater core that's of the similar size. They sell them, just they have different attachments on the end, and I'll just fix the attachments to where they work. The other alternative is to send this heater core to the local radiator shop and have it rebuilt. That may be a little expensive, but that's always an option if I need it. Alright, well that wraps it up for this episode of my Dodge Raider rebuild project. Tune back in next week and we'll talk to you then. Thanks.